Do gaming remakes deserve the hate they're getting? So this generation and the last, we've been getting a lot more remakes in gaming. Of course, some of the big names are the Resident Evil series, Silent Hill 2, Ocarina of Time, which is coming out later this year, Star Fox, which just came out, some Sony IPs like The Last of Us. So when people are saying that there's more gaming remakes than ever, I would bet that that's true. With that being said, I don't think remakes are inherently bad or bad for the industry, like a lot of people say. Now, it is true that some remakes are unnecessary, some remakes are not treated with care, some remakes are made instead of new games, and that stuff I'm all against. So if we want to look more into that, an example of a remake I think was just completely unnecessary was like The Last of Us Part 1. So I think the remake is probably the definitive version to play the game. Like, it's literally just the same exact game, but just cleaned up on the PS5. But did we really need that? Did we need a PS3 game that was remastered on the PS4 as a PS5 game? And then did we need that for $70 when the remaster you could buy for like under $10 now? Did we need another remake / reimagining, whatever you want to call it, of Star Fox 64? Because we already got the remake on the 3DS, we got Star Fox Zero, which was a reimagining, and it's been 10 years since that game, and we haven't gotten anything else. So they actively worked on a remake instead of a new game for Star Fox. So that's all stuff we can call out. Whether the remake is good or not is sort of besides the point. Like, I think it is important that these games can still be quality games, but doesn't mean that people aren't justified in questioning them. I just want to say I'm going to be making an essay video about video game remake discourse, and I'm going to be going over a lot of different topics of the problems with just shutting down any people who may prefer remakes or anything like that, so be sure to subscribe for that. But now with other remakes, like if we look at Resident Evil, so we've gotten Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 remakes since 2019, and we're getting another one next year, but I don't think Capcom deserves criticism for remaking all these games for a few reasons. No, I think we can criticize the games themselves when looking at them individually, but I don't think we should just criticize them for remaking these games. Because if they were not making new games, if they were just making remakes, then sure, yeah, then it would be clear they're prioritizing remakes over new games. But since the remake era began in 2019, we got a game in 2021 and 2026. So that's pretty normal for the series, every 4 to 5 years. And the remakes themselves are of games that are old now. Resident Evil 2 remake came out in 2019. The original Resident Evil 2 came out in 1998. So that's 21 years between 3 generations. The original was on the PS1, the remake was on PS4, for example. Resident Evil 3, same thing, the next year. Then Resident Evil 4 remake in 2023, and the original was 2005. So 18 years, a couple generations had passed. And I think these were great remakes except for 3. I think 3 is not the best game, but I think 2 and 4 were fantastic remakes. And I have no problem with Capcom making these because I feel like they were necessary. I feel like they meaningfully built on the originals for modern hardware, and it's not preventing them from making new games. So if you have personal problems with the game, that's fine, but I have no problem with these remakes actually coming out. And the same goes for a lot of other games. Silent Hill 2, a classic PS2 game remade for the PS5, got a whole new generation into Silent Hill, and now we're getting new games every year for Silent Hill. So yeah, so it came after a long gap and it was a remake instead of a new game. But since then, they've made a new game and they're working on another one that's coming out in just a couple months. So that kind of reignited the series. Now, if we look at Ocarina of Time, which is of course a very popular discussion right now, the original Ocarina of Time came out in 98. So 28 years. And yeah, we got the 3DS remaster / remake, whatever you want to consider it. We got that in 2011. So that's been 15 years now on hardware from like 2000. Like, the 3DS has worse graphics than the GameCube, so it's not like we've had a true modern way to play Ocarina of Time. Now, I still think Ocarina of Time is an absolute classic, one of my favorite games of all time. Specifically, the 3DS version I think is the best version, but I don't hate that we're getting a remake for 3 reasons. One is that it's not replacing a new 3D Zelda. We got Tears of the Kingdom in 2023. We're not getting another one for probably 2, 3, maybe even 4 years, so it's not preventing them from making a new game. It's bridging the gap between those games, so it's giving Zelda fans something to play in that time, because there's not any more remasters they can make of the 3D games. Like, yeah, they can make a port of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, but what, that would be a port of a remaster? That's not really anything new. And also, I just love to see how they're going to build on Ocarina of Time, how they're going to make a modern version of this game work. Because while it's a fantastic game, it of course does not look the best now. It of course has the quirks of the games of the time, even the 3DS version. So I'm curious to see how Nintendo can make this game for a new generation and give the generations that have played it before another way to experience it, because I'd love to experience Ocarina of Time again in a new ways, as long as this remake actually feels like there's care put into it. Like, I know people throw around the word soulless a lot when it comes to remakes, and usually what they mean by that is this remake is being made for money. And yeah, every single remake, every single video game is made for money. But what I care about is, are they being respectful to the original game? And are they trying to make this a quality game too? And what I mean by are they being respectful to the original game is, are they keeping like the bones of that game intact and just reimagining it for modern hardware? Like something like Silent Hill 2, I think is a great example. Yes, it's a very different game. It's not a replacement for the original because they're two very different experiences, but I still think it respects the original. You have the same story for the most part, you have the same characters, you have the same locations, and yes, there are differences. Like, there's a lot more combat, there's different puzzles, there's different dialogue, there's differences in the characters. But even if you prefer the original, I think it's hard to ignore that there is at least care put into this game, that they tried to take the original game and then modernize it. So going back to the main discussion, why are remakes so hated now? And I think there's a couple of reasons for this also. Now, everyone's going to be different for why they may hate that remakes are a thing. I think a popular one is that people are very nostalgic for the original games. Like, if someone played Final Fantasy VII when it came out in the 90s, and then they see the remake, they might just automatically prefer the original without even playing the remake because they have so much nostalgia attached to this game, they may think that there's no reason to remake it. So I think that's probably the most common one. Another one is, like I mentioned, people think it's replacing new games from being made, or they're just seeing that a lot of what's coming out now is a remake or a remaster. And that's valid to feel that way when it seems like there are just so many remakes and just so few original games. But I think, like I said, for the most part, a lot of these remakes aren't preventing new games from being made in the series that you love. Like, do you think Ocarina of Time is preventing Nintendo from making another 3D Zelda? Or do you think they're delaying the next 3D Zelda because of the Ocarina of Time remake? No. So again, there are remakes where I think that there is a lot of criticism that's justified, like The Last of Us Part 1. I think the game itself is perfectly fine. I think it's just a better version of the original Last of Us, but it just didn't really need to happen. Like, is it preventing Sony from making a new game? Probably not. I don't think if this remake existed that Sony would just have another big exclusive. But at the same time, is this really worth $70 when you get the same experience with just worse graphics for like $60 cheaper? Like, that's an example of a remake that's just very faithful. Like, it's like a replica remake, as I call it, or a one-to-one remake, whatever you want to call it. It's a remake that doesn't really try to change the original game. It just builds on the graphics, might change like a few things here and there. And I think sometimes that's a good thing. I think like the Paper Mario Thousand Year Door remake is a great example of this, same with Super Mario RPG. Like, those are games that are old now. Like, Super Mario RPG came out in 96, I believe, on the Super Nintendo. Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door came out in 2004. So when both these games got remakes, they were 20 plus years old. And for the Super Mario RPG remake, like, it's an SNES game, so of course it's gonna have quirks there. Like, it's gonna have like a clunky UI and stuff. And the remake just modernizes. It basically just puts modern Switch graphics in this game and then adds a few new things. And then with Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, it's similar. I think the game itself needed a remake less, but at the time, there was no GameCube NSO, so it made more sense because there was no way to play this game unless you had a GameCube or an original Wii, and the copies of this game, they're not overly expensive, but still older than you'd want from a 20-plus-year-old game. So I think those are good examples of one-to-one remakes. The Last of Us, like I said, it got a remaster in 2014 on the PS4. There's no one who can just play The Last of Us Part 1 remake who can't play the remastered version, because you can play the remastered version on the PS5. Plus, at the time of the remake, the original game, I think was only 10 years old. It came out in 2023 or 2024, so around a decade old, and still had great voice acting, was very cinematic, played just fine. So this remake just like existed to have a better version of it, but like not that much better, and charge full price. So I think remakes like that are kind of why people dislike the idea of a remake, and a lot of times they'll ignore a lot of the great remakes that we've gotten. Now, you're allowed to prefer the originals, but I think if you're just going into a remake saying, I'm going to prefer the original no matter what, this remake doesn't need to happen, it's hard to take your argument with any objectivity, because you're already admitting that you have too much nostalgia attached to have a fair opinion. I think no matter what, people will always find reasons to prefer the original over a remake, whether it's justified or not. Maybe they'll say something like, I prefer the shade of blue in the original game. Like, people will try to make any argument they can for the original, and I think sometimes the original is still a lot better, but I think a lot of you will agree that there's a lot of people who will prefer the original no matter what. And then these people are usually very loud about how much they hate remakes, so that's kind of why we see a lot of this sentiment. Now, I think part of the sentiment could also be that it does seem like there are less new games, like new big games coming out, and I don't have the numbers on that. Maybe if someone in the comments wants to post that, but I think they're two separate things. I think games just take longer to make nowadays, and I think that's a big reason we're getting remakes. So obviously money is a big part of this. Like, if there's a classic game that a company's not making money off of, yeah, making a remake of it makes sense to generate some revenue. But I think there's a couple other reasons why. One is that video games have simply been around longer now. So when I started YouTube all the way back in 2015, the NES was 30 years old. It's over 40 years old now, and it feels like it goes by in the blink of an eye. And you got to think that there's more and more games that can use remakes now as we go more into the future. Like, if we go back to 2015, like, there were Nintendo 64 games at the time that were 15 years old, which doesn't seem that old. And then now we look at those games from 2000 that are over 25 years old. Like, there's been a generation of kids who have been born since then who are getting into gaming now. And it can be hard for younger people to go back to N64, PS1 game, even like PS2, GameCube era. Like, a lot of those games are very dated today from any game that's been made in the past decade. Now, I don't think that means that people should never go back to these games, because I think there's a lot of fantastic games that were made during these times. But these games make more sense to remake than games from like the NES era, or even a lot of SNES games, because those were like pixel art games. They were typically simpler games, so remaking them wouldn't really do much. But then when you get into like the 3D era of games, where games get more complex and they start to feel clunkier from today's standards, I understand why these games are being remade. And then the other big reason, I think, is that since games just take longer to make nowadays, the remakes are bridging the gaps between these newer games, because oftentimes other studios make these remakes. Like if we look at Resident Evil, so let's go back to 2017 with Resident Evil 7. So that's been 9 years now. If all we got in that time was Village in 2021 and Requiem in 2026, it wouldn't really feel like we're getting that much Resident Evil content, just because there'd be those years in between with nothing. But since we've gotten 3 remakes in between that time, and we're getting another one next year, there's more content for people to play. Like, it can keep fans of the series busy and have something to look forward to and play. Now, I think unlike pretty much every generation before this, even really like the 8th generation games usually didn't take this long to make, but I think that was kind of like the start of this. If we go back a couple generations, there was almost always a few games per series per generation, or at least a couple. Like the next generation, we got 2. We got 7 and Village is kind of like in between, like where it also released on next gen, but I'm gonna consider it to be like an 8th gen game since it's on 8th gen consoles. And now Requiem is going to be the only brand new Resident Evil game for this generation. And look at GTA, like of course the popular example, but we got 3 games on the 6th gen of consoles. We got San Andreas, Vice City, and GTA 3 then. Then we even got 2 in the next generation, and now we're finally getting another GTA game after 13 years. Development times just take so long now that it could really suck if you have to wait over a decade or close to a decade for a new game in a series you love. So having another team separate work on a remake of a classic game in that series, I just don't see as a bad thing, as long as it's treated with care, as long as it feels necessary, as long as it does something meaningful, and meaningful can mean different things. It doesn't have to mean completely reinventing the game. It can mean just modernizing an old game, making a game more accessible. That's completely subjective. I know that no matter what, there's going to be people in the comments just saying how I'm wrong about everything, saying how, no, actually, we're right about hating remakes. And this is just my take on it. I think that remakes can be a good thing, and I think they can be a bad thing. I think it's important to look at the good of it, since people always focus on the negatives. But let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts on remakes? What are games you'd like to see remade? Games that you think were unnecessary? So be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.